Hey, John.
Hello.
Hey, that's what yeah.
Handshake.
Welcome to Fred and John Talks. This is part 2 of our episodes on hands, human hands. And you know, what we have found is the more we have pondered it and talked about it and, in preparation, the more it leads to. I'll use the analogy of what people sometimes say in college. I know it applied to me when I went to college. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Correct.
And so the more we talked about this, the more we realized we were leaving out. So we're obviously not going, this is not going to be an exhaustive thing, but we are doing it 2 parts and might do a third in the future. But let's start out with, because in the first episode, if you watched it, but in case you didn't, we talked about mostly the positive. We talked about the biblical.
Yes.
We talked about playing musical instruments and so on. Well, hands can be used. Oh, and we talked about the biblical, the laying on of hands for healing and all that. But hands can be used for bad and even for evil, unfortunately. On a just a low level, person to person thing, usually men, fist fights. You need hands to have a fist fight. If you're angry on the road at another driver, you can stick up one of the fingers on your hand to convey.
Is that this one?
That would not be it.
That's not it?
No.
Is it the new one like that? It's not that?
Oh, by the way, everybody knows what finger it is. By the way, one of the things I forgot in the first video when we were talking about, you were talking about sign language.
Yes, sign language.
We could do a whole episode on that. But I know of at least one player in Major League Baseball, but there's a lot of athletes now making hand gestures to the crowd, and maybe it's people they know. But Bryce Harper, who's I think a superstar for the Philadelphia Phillies, when he does a good thing, like a good hit or especially a home run, he looks up at the audience and goes like that, which I think is the symbol for "I love you" in sign language. Yeah, he always does that. So anyway, but back to the negative. John, you mentioned, so I'm going to hand this over to you. Flipping a switch, whether it was in dropping a bomb or putting a prisoner to death.
Electric chair.
I just want to throw in,
Electric chair.
it takes a finger to shoot a gun at somebody,
Yes.
And of course, that can be used for good when the good guys are fighting the bad guys in a war, like trying to take out Hitler. But it's also used a lot of gun deaths in the world. But anyway, talk about those 2 things you mentioned, the bomber,
yeah.
B-52.
Well, let's face it. Somebody had to fly the B-52 by hand into Japan to drop the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I don't know the exact precise way that the bomb was dropped. I always thought it was a manual release of the bomb. But you have that act, which was pretty brutal to mankind. I remember even as a young kid watching and looking at, was it the Saturday Evening Post or one of the magazines that had pictures of the big
mushroom cloud.
The mushroom cloud coming up. And it never would have dawned on me at that time that would have required an airplane, a pilot, the use of hands.
The Enola Gay.
The Enola Gay.
That was the name of the plane, right?
That was the name of the game. And the bomb was called the Fat Boy, wasn't it?
The Fat Boy. Fat Boy.
That's a very destructive way that hands can be used. The electric chair, we were talking about that. Someone has to flip the switch. Maybe it starts with something that the governor decides. Maybe it's an act of what the court says about the death penalty. But down the road, that edict in print has to be put into effect by fingers and hands.
And that leads back to what we were talking about signatures.
Ooh, signatures.
We're
yes.
talking about the signatures on documents that are lethal, but also on documents that bring about freedom and bring about good things like the Emancipation Proclamation,
Yes.
the signing of the Constitution. And,
Yes.
you know, John Hancock had such good handwriting, it became a little quip, put your John Hancock on this, your
Yes.
signature. All done with hands.
Oh, almost anything you do in banking, signing checks, has to be done with the fingers and with the hands.
Yeah.
You have to think about this, YouTubers. The hands are really very valuable tool. It's quite stunning when you think about the things that happen through handwork and hand activities. What about social media, Fred? Let's put that on the positive negative scale of justice.
There's two sides to it.
All the interactions of social media occur through fingers.
Yeah. That and a keyboard.
That's why your children don't look at you, because they're like this all day long. You need to have your breakfast.
Oh, on phones, computers.
They're busy.
Yep. Well, I want to open the discussion up for you to talk about your 40-year medical career, because another thing that whole category is the healing arts.
Yes, that's true.
Doctors, nurses, people work in the medical profession. I was thinking massage therapists. We'll come back to doctors in a minute, but oh no, I'm sorry. Let's go with that, because you delivered, so many lives,
thousands of babies.
You get these babies out of the womb into your hands.
It starts with even the use of the stethoscope with the ear, and the hand puts the stethoscope on the mother's belly to listen for the heartbeat. It has to do with putting an IV in the vein to give medications and drugs to start labor.
To the mother.
Yeah, to the mother. To start labor or even stop labor.
Oh, sometimes it has to be induced.
Yes, sometimes it has to be induced, Fred. Or my first child tried to come early, and we gave my wife medication to stop labor.
Oh, I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yes, there are medications to stop and control labor and try and slow it down, and that all requires an IV or some kind of injection by hand to do that.
Yeah.
Whenever you're training in medicine, you go through surgical training, and that means often you start by watching somebody else use a scalpel to cut, and then you watch them load a needle in a needle holder and stitch, and then you have to practice with your own needle holder, usually at home or in the dorm room or someplace like that, stitching into an orange or stitching into an apple in order to simulate different types of body tissues. And then you have to practice tying knots.
I never understood stitches. I mean, you actually put a needle. I've never had stitches in my life. You put a needle, just like a woman sewing, into the skin and out the other side?
The needle...
Isn't that painful?
The needle... with sutures, the suture is almost always attached to the needle. It's already attached to the needle. So you don't have to thread any needle.
Right.
So you take the needle and you put it in a pincher device called a clamp or a needle holder. And yes, you have to do a little arc, a little half moon.
Do they have a local anesthetic?
Yes, you can inject local anesthesia. Again, that's an injection with your fingers.
Yeah.
Or drawing up medication, lidocaine, xylocaine, something like your dentist would use to inject in the jaw.
Whew.
So you have that.
I'm 68 years old, and I never even asked these questions.
So you have that kind of training that to do with fingers and hands and dexterity. And when you get into surgery and eventually do your own surgery, you've got to learn how to cut in layers, cut in depths, to get to something you're going to operate on, like the appendix. And then you've got to clamp the appendix off with a clamp. and cut it off. There are so many things done with the hands that way. Here's another little story in medicine. I got to the point, Fred, after quite a few years of operating, that I was getting a lot of soreness in my neck. And so I was talking to my massage therapist, and he said, John, which side of the table do you operate on? And I said, well, I usually stand on the patient's left side, and I work with my right hand more. And he said, well, that's why you're getting pain so much on the left side of your neck with massage. He said, I can tell with massage that you really need to change sides of the table. Well, it never occurred to me that I should stand on the other side of the table.
Right. They're right.
So all the time I'm operating for years, I'm standing on this side of you, on your left side.
My left side.
And working on the pelvis and then the abdominal cavity with the right hand mostly. So whenever I went to standing on the other side, I would make an incision with the left hand and it felt like I was doing the wrong thing. It didn't feel right. Yeah. Or if I tried to use the right hand.
Because you're right-handed.
I was right-handed. It felt awkward. And then whenever I was doing procedures inside the abdominal cavity, inside of individuals, looking at organs, it looked like the anatomy was different. And I thought, how is that possible? I'm looking in the same space, looking at the same organs, but just looking at them from one side of the body to the other.
This sounds like a Far Side comic.
It was a Far Side comic. It took me a while to understand how to use my left hand more than my right.
I would think.
Just by that simple thing of changing sides.
Does your neck get better?
Yes, I think it did. I think I can actually say it did get better.
That's good.
Then I think for those of you who know about obstetrics, that would be mostly our women viewers. Mm-hmm. Just the whole examination of women by hand over many, many months, whether it's vaginal use of the hand or palpation on the belly to feel the baby, all that is transferring knowledge to me and transferring knowledge back to the mother
through the hands.
Through the hands, yes.
Yes, and I'm sorry to interject, but I think I left this out. We also talked before about affectionate touch. This is old news, but I want to tell it. Affectionate touch releases feel-good chemicals in the brain, such as dopamine.
Yes.
So touching someone in an affectionate way, between husband and wife, between friends, it makes you feel good. There's power conveyed through the hands, healing power. Not only in the medical profession. Some people, I think this is a little exaggerated, but some people have said, I've read books, psychology books, I work in psychology, people need about 10 hugs a day. Yeah, I'd be lucky if I get one. But hugs, affectionate touch, releases feel good, maybe even endorphins, but definitely dopamine, serotonin, things like that.
That means reaching out.
Yeah.
And hugging somebody.
Yeah. I got to tell this story that I told off camera. So, many moons ago, to be exact, 1980 to 1983, I was in the Catholic seminary studying to be a Catholic priest. I left and subsequently worked for the Catholic Church as a layman in New York State for 5 years. And during those years, and that was in my 20s, and it wasn't easy, I gotta tell you, I'm no saint or angel. I was celibate. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I worked for this wonderful program called the Parish Mission Team, which was made up of clergymen and women and laymen and women. And we all lived together, and we went out in separate vans to do weeks of spiritual renewal in the churches. Well, they had the wisdom to have, like a mediator, a facilitator come in, because we had to live together. And when you got a lot of people living together, you got personality conflicts.
Yeah.
Well, subject of relationships came up one day, and touch. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm misremembering. And this, Oh, I'm so glad I
You got to get
misremembered.
the story right.
I'm
Fred.
so glad I misremembered. It wasn't a facilitator. It was a woman who came and gave a demonstration. She was a potter. She came with her potter's wheel.
Okay.
And talk about hands. I did want to get that in. That's why I'm glad I remembered. She was demonstrating, you know, the wheel going around and her shaping it with her hands. And then she paused and she asked us questions about our lives and where we were at with our lives. And I said the following, and the room busted out laughing. I said, lately I have been feeling so starved for affectionate touch that I look forward to going to the dentist.
To the dentist.
Now I know it's not affectionate touch at the dentist, but at least they touch you.
That's on the opposite end of the spectrum. That's on the opposite end of the spectrum.
That's how bad off I was back in those days. I said, I'm so starved for touch, I look forward to going to the dentist.
My mother, Fred, always wanted me to be a dentist.
Really?
Yeah, and she
Oh.
never could figure out how she wanted me to go from being a dentist to me working on the opposite end of the body as a gynecologist. I said, I don't know how that happened. I have no idea.
Oh, that's
In
good.
any respect, Fred, we have left out a lot of possibilities
I'll tell you.
for we want.
I got a list here.
Yeah, we want our YouTube audience to be inspired by some of the things we talk about, but we want you to be thinking about hands and all the things that hands do. I mean, there's the arts. We haven't even mentioned things like Rodin, the arts, the painting.
Michelangelo, artists, sculptors.
Yes.
I mentioned potters.
Yes.
You mentioned before we went on air all the trades, the carpenters, the plumbers, the electricians.
What would we do without them? Painters.
This has the makings of, getting a lot of feedback from our listening audience.
Yes.
Maybe some of your personal experiences, good, bad, or ugly. Hopefully, most of them good. Maybe a future episode where you and I brainstorm and come up with we could do part 3. But for now,
Let's let you have some input. Please send us some of your ideas about hands or some of the extraordinary, unusual things you've seen done with hands and fingers. We would appreciate it.
How about ending on this beautiful note? When I go about my business and shopping in a store or walking in a park, younger people, yes, I love seeing it too. But when I see old couples together and they're holding hands,
Yes.
holding hands,
That's
probably even after many years of marriage,
a good way to finish.
that's a good way to finish.
Hold hands.
Yeah.
Show affection.
Yeah.
Show love. Ciao.
Ciao.